So, here we are. Amazing content, amazing coincidence that I decided to make content in a coincidence. Wow. Anyways, let me transition to here. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Another beautiful evening. Another beautiful session for us to be here to think a little bit, to analyze some content, and to be present because being present is the most enjoyable thing that could happen. Um, anyways, welcome everyone. Once again, we were here. We are analyzing, we are studying, we are observing, we are enjoying the act of presently thinking, let's say, about what is presented to us. So, yeah, um, today we have another new lecture. Today we have a new thing to ponder on slash about. So yeah, let me see. Let me grab this over here. Copy this. And yeah, well, hello. Basically, hello. Welcome as always, everybody. Welcome, dear lurkers, dear bot watchers, dear everybody. I once again, sadly, the bot is fucking dead, so I cannot do anything about it in the sense of yeah, we have lost once again our beautiful friend, the bot. I would be happy if I didn't have to worry about it, but I don't know. It it seems like the bot is not the bot, sorry. The whole stream elements thing is there. The whole stream elements thing is dead. So I don't know. I am a little bit worried, let's say, but I don't know. Um, probably, probably. I I would be happy if we didn't have to worry so much about making this work in the sense of um, lag and such. But well, at the very least, now we don't have to worry about internet and anything like that anymore. We only have to think and to be wary, let's say, about all the other problems that might come with being so consistent, or the opposite, being inconsistent. So yeah, it feels better than to know that sometimes I had almost the excuse to say, yeah, I couldn't stream now because my internet decided to lag or something. Kind of, I wouldn't completely say stupid, but rather boring like that. Because at the end of the day, it is a responsibility to commit to what we are doing and to commit to what we are trying to go for. So failing to do so ends up being really, I wouldn't say negative in every single sense of the word, but hurtful, as it truly negates us from the possibility of having, I wouldn't say simply a backlog, because it isn't important to simply have a backlog, but rather it negates us from the most important possibility, and that is to try and have everything working as it might as well have been intended to. And I think that in the sense of stacking up, let's say, decorum and stacking up also achievements, because at the very least, even if they do not seem that important, every single one of the streams is contributing towards the creation of something bigger and bigger. And when we start to work on all of those things, and when we start to make it constantly happen, it is that also not only us in that sense, because it almost gets boring, Um, you you have the possibility of doing something good, but if it were to happen only once, it might never be observed by anybody else, but those who really not simply care, but really are in that moment. So, let's say like this: when you can put yourself to, out there more and more for the sake of creating something worthy, that, and well, incredibly sorry if I say the word in the sense of insulting anybody. I rather will mean it like worthy as in having it exist as something that people can truly enjoy. Because it is important, yes, to try and go for something that we ourselves can also enjoy. But I don't know, I don't know. People seems to forget that a lot of times, and even more. Well, let me say it like this. A lot of times, yes, and even more here in this particular zone. Let's call it like that. What we do is not only mm, enclosed to our existence. It also encompasses all the other things that have to deal with all the other lives almost of everybody else aside from us. So if we forget that we almost have a necessity of not, I wouldn't simply say serving, because funnily enough, it also happens that we do not create this as something born from the interest of serving most of the time. We simply make it from the desire to put anything together that might be worthy of serving. Let's cut it like that. And when we have that existing, and when we have that being consistently worked on, it is that we can truly not simply believe, but also truly observe that all of those who are around it are enjoying what is being created. Because if not, we can focus only on our interests, but there is also almost no joy in doing that. I mean, we can try to believe and we can try to attribute more merit than what we really would benefit from if we were to say, yeah, everything else is the way it is because of me and because of my existence and such. When in reality, almost all things end up boiling down to the notion of, is this useful for me, for others, or not? And sadly, I would say like this, sadly, I don't know if it is a concept that everybody can understand throughout their life, in the sense of all the humans can see it like that, or if it is something more like everybody can find it to be true, but the problem is, if you find it to be real, how late in your life do you find it to be a reality? And even more, how many opportunities have you already spent, let's say? Because on the other side, what I notice or what I feel happens is we have the chance of creating anything good, and we have also the chance of helping others with what we create. But if we focus on what we want, we might as well negate from us the possibility of making that which is entertaining for others and which is also helpful to others. But if we see it soon enough and if we start working on it soon enough, then nobody not, cannot simply not say that what we are making is not worth it, but also can't tell us that we spend our time, and even more on a deeper level, not simply nobody as in random people, but even more nobody as in ourselves, who really matter, those who are there for the sake of knowing that they are there. Because sadly, what also is a reality is we tend to forget that we are never alone, man. We wish we were completely alone in the universe, but we cannot avoid being surrounded by people. Even the most antisocial animals find themselves surrounded by others in some way or another. But yeah, I think that is all I can say so far. Let me blow my nose, and after that, we are properly. Okay, there it is. Amazing. And now let me transition into here. I think I didn't change the video speed, so give me a second. Playback speed 1.25, and yeah, we should be on. So let me also close this pin. And yeah, we should be all set up, no? I'm not forgetting about anything, I think, alright? Ah, no, yeah. I knew it. Thank God I saw it. Let me mute the clock. Let me activate the background audio. And now for real, we are ready. Starting. Ah, no, wait. Also, let me create a marker. Um, marker intro. Let's get it like that. Intro. Um, well, now for real. Sorry, we are starting with the study. Yes, lecture 11, MIT 9.00 SC Introduction to Psychology, Spring 2011. Play.
So
Memory
when
2.
we talked about learning, we said that everything we know comes from learning except that which is given to us by our genes. Our knowledge of how to walk around in the world, to read, to think, to talk, to feel, the values we have, the hopes we have, the fears we have, they're all learned through experience. And then we talked about another approach to thinking about how we learn things through memory. And today I'm going to talk about what we understand to be the brain organization of human memory. And
Okay, wait. Let us pause for a second. Because what seems interesting enough, at least so far, is when we try to talk about mind stuff, we find ourselves really saying that what we see is the way it is, and there shouldn't be any other way to consider it or to try and see it from. Although I don't think there is any real way in which reality itself unfolds differently from what we think. But I don't know. It never stops being weird almost to see that we live, I would say, in every single aspect of our life, believing that all the concepts that exist are the way they are, and they are correct, and they shouldn't be pondered, let's say. But well, happiness still, because even if we do not completely agree with that, we can continue. So yeah.
Oliver Sacks, in the chapter on the Lost Mariner, chapter 2, talks about one of the two major kinds of amnesia, the loss of memory due to a brain disorder or brain injury. But he has a very nice language from Luis Buñuel talking about memory. You have begun to lose your memory, if only in bits and pieces, to realize that memory is what makes our life. Life without memory is no life at all. Our memories are coherence, our reason, our feeling, even our action. Without it, we are nothing. I can only wait for the final amnesia, the one that erases an entire life as it did my mother's, right? So our memories of our lives, what we've done, where we've been, what mattered to us, that's a huge piece of who we are. And he runs into a patient who came into the hospital early in 1975 with a note saying helpless, demented, confused, and disoriented. He had what we call clinically Korsakoff's syndrome. So these are individuals who have severe alcoholism for many years, and a subset of those people develop a severe memory disorder like this man. He's 49 years old. He tells Sachs about his life, details of his life going into World War II, that he worked on a submarine and so on. And Sachs has a full and interesting life, remembered visually in detail, but for some reason his memories stop around World War II. Then he asked him, what year is it? Remember, the year is 1975, and he says, it's 1945. What do you mean? We've won the war. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt is dead. Truman's at the helm. These are great times ahead. And Jimmy, how old would you be? He stopped and he said, well, I guess I'm 19. That would have been his age, 20 years ago, right? 30 years ago. So, he's stuck in time. He thinks it's historically a while ago. He has a completely wrong age. And Sachs takes out a mirror and throws it at him and says, what happened? And he says, Jesus Christ, what's going on? What happened? Is this a nightmare? Am I crazy? Is this a joke? So it's as if he's lost the last 30 years of his life, and he's living as if it were 30 years ago. And then when he walks back in, he's hardly recognized. Sachs is hardly recognized by the person. On intelligence, he shows excellent ability. But his memory is very quickly, he forgets things. What is this? I asked him, showing a photo in the magazine I was holding. It's the moon. No, it's not. If it's a picture of the Earth taken from the moon. I mean, don't forget, 1945, nobody imagined that we would be sending up people to the moon, right? And taking pictures from the moon of the Earth. You're used to it. It's nothing to you. No, it's not. It's a picture of the Earth taken from the moon. Doc, you're kidding. Somebody would have to get a camera up there naturally. Hell, you're joking. How would you know that? So he has, has lost the last 30 years of his life for all practical purposes, despite normal intelligence and normal thought. So we're going to talk more about how this occurs in patients, another patient, and more generally, how the brain supports your ability to learn things. So here's this remarkable.
Okay, here. I mean, a possible stopping thing to try and take note of is the concepts of seeing how many different traumas affect the way in which memory gets or not allocated into the brain. Because I, I'm pretty sure at this point it was already mentioned that the different parts of the memory itself have to deal not only with memory, but also even more with other varying concepts, such as, for example, understanding that when we go through something so shocking, our brain has to process all of that. And if it cannot properly process what was the event itself, what happened, or what keeps happening in some cases, and even more sadly, what is going to keep happening, if all of those things cannot work, the brain needs to shut down, let's say, parts of the, in this case, functioning sites that are correlated to memory for the sake of, at a later point in life, processing all of the things that happen. And in some cases, uh, as it, I guess it was kind of implied here, but it happens with alcoholism and other heavy drugs. If you use them long enough, what you can do to yourself ends up being inducing that state in the brain without really going through any of those kind of experiences, let's say, because you don't need to really experience trauma as you are giving your brain um, stress enough to make it believe that it is going through an stressing experience. All because, and all of those things because you simply are incredibly, I wouldn't simply say damaging, because it almost feels like you are accusing the individual of not taking care, but rather you didn't comprehend properly what it meant to indulge in such activities, let's say like that, less aggressive. We are so back. Well, at the very least, they decided to knock on my door instead of screaming. But well, here we are. I was basically saying that, yeah, it is interesting enough to also analyze and take into account how the brain itself might get damaged and whatnot. So, yeah, I don't know. I will be a little bit preoccupied in the sense of seeing if we are not experiencing things like that ourselves, but also amnesia itself might mm, block us from really noticing those things happening. So I don't know, I don't know. We shall continue.
Brain, right? And in one sense, you could say it's almost all there to absorb things in life, right? Yeah, you have very small insects that can do a lot with the genes they're given. We have big brains to sort of learn the life we lead. And I'm going to come back at the end to this metaphor with the idea that in many ways, your brain as you sit there right now, or any healthy brain, is kind of like a symphony orchestra that has many specialized instruments for learning different kinds of things. And you feel like a unified whole, and you are, and these instruments interact with each other. But just like a symphony orchestra, together they make a sound. So imagine you're a Martian who lands outside a symphony hall, and you hear a symphony playing, something beautiful that sounds really interesting. If you're a Martian on the outside of the symphony hall, how many instruments are you guessing? How many things might you guess are making that sound? Would you have any idea? One big one, two big ones, 50? It would be very hard to guess. And it's only been in the last 20 years or so that we had some real clarification on the instruments of learning in our brains. So I'm going to talk about three things today. And Tara.
Whoa, we changed the way of the. We changed everything, my man. What the fuck? We changed typography. We changed. Wow, changes. Wow, finally, we changed background color we change. Also, there is a red square now. Amazing. This is leveling up. This doesn't feel anymore like something I could be putting together. Incredible. Welcome, Klondike. I think I said it, but welcome. Anyways, my friend, we are today studying some more. Yeah, I got shocked by this. Continue.
Retrograde amnesia, the loss of the ability to form new memories. Retrograde amnesia, the loss of memories you already had. And that idea of memory systems, this idea that each of us has a symphony of learning instruments in our brain that empowers us to learn different kinds of things. So interrogative amnesia is, again, the inability to remember new information. And people mostly talk about two kinds, but as you see, they're most of life, okay? Not all of it, we'll talk about that, but a lot of it, such as events you experience or facts you encounter. So think about this. All the events you've remembered from your entire life, all the facts you've ever learned in school, at home, on the computer, that's a huge amount of what you know. And a patient like we just described, or a patient I'll describe in a moment, lose the ability to remember any event from the day they become amnesic or remember much in the way of new information of any kind in terms of facts of the world. So
Well, I mean, I remember I didn't properly study this earlier in my life, but I remember seeing things related to this concept. Like, for example, one of the main theories or similar was because something mm, more than anything else, it is related to physical trauma. Let's say, what would be damage on the brain, and because of brain damage, it needs to heal. And I guess kind of secondary or yeah, and secondary effect of trying to heal the brain is that it ends up shutting down the whole memory side of it. As yeah, I mean, in other cases, it happens that somebody loses capacity of moving a limb or a whole side of their body for quote unquote similar reasons to this. So yeah, I don't know. It's trying to yeah, I will say at the very least, trying to put ourselves into the shoes of somebody going through an experience like this is almost impossible because we can't forget about what we know, sadly, quote unquote. But on the other side, we can at the very least be happy and not find ourselves annoyed by what we see and what we go through and such. But, anyways, continue.
in what sense is memory in the brain distributed or localized? In what sense is it in one place or many places? And this has been a sort of a central debate, isn't all of neuroscience, but in memory too. And Carl Lashley, a sort of giant of neuroscience who worked just 2 T-stops away at Harvard, said this: it's not possible to demonstrate the isolated localization of a memory trace anywhere in the nervous system. The engram is represented throughout the brain. The engram is kind of a magic word in memory in the brain. The engram is the thing in you that changes in your brain, that is the stuff of a memory. If you learn today that there's more terrible news in Japan with the nuclear reactors, and you remember that because it matters to you, because you care about the people in that, there's a physical change in your brain that is the memory. If you remember what I'm saying now for more than a few moments, that is a physical change in your brain. So all of us in neuroscience are amazed by that. How can we physically change the brain to be the biological record of a memory that we can keep and use in the future?
I mean, it is kind of easy to say that it happens because, to a sense, our brain is a machine. So incredibly complex that we call it the nature and such, but it still is a machine. And the memories are still bits and such parts of memory itself. I mean, this is kind of early on. Yeah, this is 2011. But how many years ago? 3 or 4. This guy, Elon Musk, created his new neuroscience thing of a chip that goes directly to the brain and affects patterns and all of that. It it is something that we slowly are discovering. But I would be even in that stage. I wouldn't say that we do not know that we didn't know so much about it. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, on the other side, what you said, Klondike, is brain damage is notoriously difficult to cure. Yes, it is incredibly difficult to cure in some cases, and in others, it is surprisingly easy if you can make the human cooperate, let's say. because there is sadly a side that gets overlooked for the necessity of not attributing so much responsibility to the doctors and such. But if you, as a professional, forget to tell your patients that they need to rest, for example, in the case of an accident, you probably are going to have either flashes of memory coming to you after going through a car accident, or you are going to lose some of your memories in the next 2 to 4 weeks. And if you do not tell that to your patient, you almost become a liability because you are not doing your part. And if you tell them how incredibly common is that for them to experience, then you can also let them be prepared to deal with it. In the same sense of you should try to avoid as much as you can while practicing any physical sport, let's say, hits directly to the head, because it also is important to know that the blows directed to the head are the most damaging ones, because not only your brain is completely rattled by the different shakings and such, but also because your memories get destroyed. So yeah, it is notoriously difficult to cure in some cases, and it also is, I will say, not so well known, easy to prevent the damage or to try to attend to it at the same time. It, it is kind of a very big walking contradiction in that sense, because yeah, it has those two same attributes. But yeah, I mean, at the very least, we don't suffer from anything like so sad, I would say.
And the engram, Carl actually said, is represented throughout the brain. It's spread throughout the brain. Here's why he thought that. So he was working with rats, and they ran a maze, right? And you saw how quickly you learn the maze to go from start to finish to get the food if you're a rat. And here's what he found. The results won't amaze you to start with, okay? So what he did is he made, this is the number of errors during learning, so it's good to be low. And this is how much neocortex they took out, ranging from 10% to 80%. And he said he discovered that the more neocortex you took out, the worse learner you were. Now, if that didn't happen in some broad sense, we'd say, well, what part of us is learning it, right? You take out more brain, you're less of a good reader, right? 10% out, 10% bad memory. 50% of the brain out, 50% bad memory. 80% of the brain out, 80% bad memory, right? Okay, that makes sense. But what he was really impressed by is it didn't seem to him to matter where he took the brain out of the rat. It just didn't matter. It's just the percent that he took out. Whatever percent he took out is how bad a learner you were. And we'll come back to that, but that's why I said it must be spread everywhere, because wherever I take out brain, part of the memory is weakened or disappears. And sometimes people call that mass action for a distributed memory that's spread throughout the brain in this mass way. It's as if it were just spread all over the place. And a single clinical case, and I'll spend a few moments on him for two reasons. It is the historical case that turned this around. And I have a particular perspective on this because when I was a graduate student, I did a lot of work with the single patient whose case turned around our understanding of the mammalian brain and memory, okay? So as I start to talk about it, and this is one, I can't tell you what Phineas Gage was really like beyond what I read, okay, or Broca's patients from the 1900s. I can tell you what H.M., the man we're about to talk about, was like, because I spent many, many hours with him 2 blocks from here when I was a graduate student in Suzanne Corkin's lab. So the structure we'll focus on is something called the hippocampus. It looks sort of big in the picture, and it's about the size of about 2/3 of your thumb, one on the left and one on the right, in the insides or the medial part of the temporal lobes. Pretty small percentage of the brain. And you can see it, it's located here. Here it is sort of drawn out. And here's the story of this man. He died a couple of years ago. There's lots of plays and movies and books in the works, okay? I can also tell you that when I was a graduate student here, my fellow graduate students would say, tell us who HM, what does his initials really stand for? As if it really mattered particularly, you know? But I felt privileged to have the secret knowledge of what his name was. When he died, they published it. Everybody knows now, so my secret is out. But, or our secret is out. But he was born in 1926. At age 16, he had his first major epileptic seizure. By age 27, he was having many, many seizures a day. You can have petit mal seizures where you tune out from the world. You can have grand mal seizures that lead to physical convulsions. By age 27, the medications were not helping him in 1953 very much that were available. And he was just sitting in his house just waiting for the next seizure, basically. That was his life. He was a man of normal intelligence and sort of fairly typical average background, nothing remarkable. And in order to treat the epilepsy, William Scoville, the surgeon, resected or took out surgically the tissue. Here's his cartoon. Of what he took out, the hippocampus, also the amygdala just in front of it, also tissue that surrounds it. And the reason he took it out is the single most likely place where epileptic seizures start is the hippocampus. It's kind of a signal in many ways that the hippocampus does something very dangerous. It's operating in some sort of fast speed lane of neurobiology. It's a very sensitive part of the brain for lack of oxygen, for diseases. We'll talk about Alzheimer's disease. It's a very vulnerable part of the brain, but it does something magical and essential for memory. And so they couldn't locate where the seizures were starting very well from him in ways they typically do. So they said, OK, he has all these seizures. We don't know what to do. Let's take out the left and the right hippocampus and the surrounding tissue. And in terms of seizure control, it was pretty successful. He had to stay on medications from that day till a few years ago when he passed away. But he had very, very few seizures compared to before that. So it was medically very successful in terms of seizure control. It had a giant side effect. From that day till a couple of years ago, HM never formed a new memory for any event or for all practical purpose for any fact that he was exposed to ever again, despite his normal intelligence and his otherwise intact abilities. So they took an MR of HM. It took a long time to decide they could even take an MR picture of HM because they were very worried that if you put him in an MR scanner, that's magnetic fields, right? And often they put in clips after surgery. Regularly they put in clips after the surgery to keep the vessels from bleeding. And they weren't sure what the clips were made of for a while. And so they said, well, we can't put him in because we could move the clips and kill him, which would be bad. So it was dangerous. And they did a huge detective process of going to the factory that made them and talking to the people who built it before they decided. It took like 10 years of research to decide that the clips were not metal and they could take an MR. And even here's a top of the brain normal person. Here's the hippocampus, the small structure in you, pretty small. It's removed in him, but you can see he's got a lot of brain left except for these removed structures. But what happened was he had such a fantastic impairment in learning new information, it got the label of a global amnesia. Global amnesia. It didn't matter that tests were hard, like remembering stuff, multiple choice. He failed practically every standard test of memory you'd ever give a person. Or if it's words or nonsense syllables, faces, clicks, mazes, public events, assassinations of presidents, wars, going to the moon, whatever you think of as famous, he didn't know they happened at all. Personal events, the death of his own parents. If you asked him how his parents were doing, he would say something like, I haven't seen them for a while. He would not know they had passed away. So no matter how publicly famous something was, no matter how personally important it was, that knowledge, he could remember it for a few seconds, and we'll talk about that more, but it would drift away completely within seconds, no matter how often he heard it, no matter how personally important it was. And you could say, what does he say his experience is like? So Brenda Milner, the neuropsychologist who did a lot of the critical original research with him, describing his case, said that he said, every day is alone in itself, whatever joy I've had and whatever sorrow I've had. I mean, it sounds very poetic, and it's true, except that for HM, his memory lasts seconds. So he doesn't remember any day, okay, since 1950 or something. So I think his experience is more like this. Right now, I'm wondering, have I done or said anything amiss? You see, at this moment, everything looks clear to me. His mind is clear. He's smart. But what happened just before? What happened a minute ago, or 2 minutes ago, or 5 minutes ago? That's what worries me. It's like waking from a dream I just don't remember. All right, so when we worked with him here a few blocks from here, he would know who I was. He would know why he was here. He was an extremely pleasant and wonderful research participant. A piece of that was, he was very nice and very pleasant. A piece of that was he didn't know time was passing. So if any of you are involved in experiments as participants, sometimes people enjoy the experiment for about 5 minutes, but not for the next 55, because we're getting a lot of measurements to get a good measurement. For HM, it was never an hour-long experiment. It was always a minute-and-a-half experiment. So you have to be very careful, not to abuse that situation as a researcher. So here's his name, Henry Molaison. Here's his pictures from his youth. And from this, but you see how we had a complete reversal? All of a sudden, the removal of just 2 small regions, the left and the right hippocampus in the brain, stopped the creation or formation of new memories altogether in any practical way. So that shows you that memory is not spread throughout the brain in a sort of undifferentiated mass action way, but that particular parts of the brain play very particular roles in how memories are formed, and the hippocampus plays a huge role in that. You can see it. So they had a big project where they brought him from the nursing home in Connecticut where he was. They drove him by ambulance to Massachusetts General Hospital. They overnight did something like an 8-hour MRI scan on him to have the world's most detailed MRI scan you practically have on anybody. And then they removed his brain and sent it to a laboratory in San Diego, where they took his brain and they sliced it into many, many, many incredibly thin slices that they're going to post on the web. Okay, and on the web for quite a while was the slicing of his brain. He consented to this. It's all this research effort, and finally his brain is a gift to research and understanding the brain and memory.
Here, okay. Finally, I can stop. It went incredibly longer than I expected. My man. Let me say like this. It happens that all of these things need to be properly observed. Because on one hand, the most important matter, the one that I can properly talk about, is what I understood so far is the brain works in a way in which all the parts create the memories, as in the whole tree is needed for the creation of something new, but the allocation of those memories gets predetermined based on what different set of skills it triggers for it to activate, let's say. So if we notice that in some places we needed to know how to, for example, if you are learning about numbers, that goes in one part of your brain. If you learn about how to use or how to remember or how to allocate, or well, not allocate, that is done subconsciously, naturally. If you learn and you try to integrate into your memory of, yeah, into your memories, how different people names works and all of that, it goes into another part, and it still is necessary for the whole brain to exist, for everything to get integrated, and even more what was said on the second part, uh, something very important that I thought at some point they weren't even going to talk about it. The whole hippocampus also needs to be present for the memories to be created properly. As it is let's say like this. It is also mentioned that the brain works as a tree because it starts in the hippocampus and all of the memories are created there first, and they after that get spread around to the local places where it is important to have them. The something kind of funny that can happen is we can still know and integrate knowledge into our different sides of the brain, even if we do not have them. But if we lose the machine itself that works to put everything together, then it becomes impossible to try and remember, no matter what we're talking about. Remember anything basically. So yeah, that was the explanation that I wanted to do on one side, and then got completely blocked off because he kept going and going about this a particular case. So something also important happens because this has a lot of things that are interesting mm, in and on itself. Because this guy was not simply interesting as a patient and as a person that could be analyzed, but also because he had, let's say, some prior, not simple knowledge, but some prior interesting facts that made him an incredibly rare case. And one of the few things that has been talked about years later is, for example, how did he really consent to stuff? He only had a 1 minute and 30 seconds of memory. And on the best of the cases, if you were able to really engage with his interest, his memory would last 2 minutes. How can you really hold a conversation with somebody like him where you make him really consent or not about the stuff? How was that they really thought he consented to anything? It was one of the major concerns after realizing or after a post-mortem analysis. And I guess here it doesn't get mentioned because it was really a big debate that existed at the time. You know, it was important to take notes, and it was important also to notice that this guy was, to a certain degree, non functional. And you might believe that you have consent, but if the person that you're interacting with seems in no way really capable of showing that he exists, you might not really be dealing with somebody like that. So I don't know. It doesn't stop being interesting, anyways. So yeah. Aside from that, um, there was information interesting to see. Like for example, he couldn't remember anything at all, and that goes back into what we were trying to talk about earlier. There is people that is like that, and there are damages on the brain that can completely make us devoid from the capacity of remembering anything new. In the cases of the trauma itself, we can heal the trauma. if we properly take care of ourselves, obviously, and we can go back into making it work. But in this case, the risk and the absolvance of the risk is what makes it, funny enough, nice. Because the other concern that was his life, for the sake of not making him anymore have so many seizures, was what really allowed this to exist instead of simply, let's say, um, making him be a non-ethical thing to, yeah, a non-ethical subject. Because in this particular case, the ethical superiority was he needs to heal and he needs to not suffer so much. So we are going to put him through something that might as well be harmful to a tinier degree than what he's actually going through for the sake of not making him die, let's say. So yeah, I don't know, interesting. But yeah, continue. I think I didn't miss anything, did I? I mean, it was incredibly long. It was incredibly long. This bit. So let me see for a second. What else might I have missed? Information. Blah, blah, blah. I think I didn't miss anything. I think. I hope. So well, continue.
So let me tell you a couple of experimental results from him, and then you might think of questions you have about what a man like this is like, okay? So we've talked about last time about that if you give a list of words to people and you try it yourself, that people remember the first word's best, the primacy effect, a long-term memory effect. It's not affected by adding a few seconds of delay, and a recency effect, superior memory for the last few words of the list, that's strongly affected by adding in just 10 seconds of delay from the last word until you recall. And this is done with other amnesic patients and not HM, but similar disorder. You can see that their memory is worse overall. They're the dark line. But they have some benefit from the beginning of the list, but it's small. It's not the same as the controls. But they're completely normal for the last 2 or 3 words. So this is what we mean by impaired long-term memory and spared short-term memory. But the short-term memory is just moments. It's not just an impression you have. It's a scientific experiment you can do. Here's another. We did this last time. We said if you read digits to people and ask them to repeat them back aloud, that we have a limited short-term memory of 7 plus or minus 2. People get to about 7 or 8 typically. So there's a sort of mean test that's given to look at something. So here's what they do. Imagine that you do this test and you were correct for 2 digits, correct for 3, repeating them back after you heard them, 4, 5, 6, 7. You did well. And then you made mistakes at 8, okay, which would be very typical for a human, right? So this your span, therefore, is 7. That's how much you can hold in short-term memory. It varies a little bit from person to person. And now they're going to do all the rest of the experiment at 1 beyond your span, right? 1 beyond what you can do. 1 beyond what your short-term memory, right? Here's the limit of your short-term memory. Let's add one thing. And one thing that we know helps memory is repetition. It's not the best way to learn things, but it is a powerful way to learn things. So now they give the entire experiment with 8 digits at a time for this person, 1 beyond what you could report. So they give you this, and then they give you this, but they give you one boost, which is every third one is the same sequence over and over again. So some you hear once and once only, and one you hear over and over again. Is that okay? Now, what would happen if you hear 8 digits over and over again? What would happen? You know this in your own life, your social security number, telephone numbers, things. What happens? Can you learn 8 digits if you do it over and over? Yeah. It wouldn't be easy, but you get it, right, with repetition. So here's what happens in typical people. Here's the repetition. Here's how well they do for the non-repeated super span ones. They never get that good because they basically can't do that. Occasionally they get lucky, but mostly not. But the ones that they repeat, they get better and better. So repetition is another way to break the bounds of short-term memory and register something in long-term memory. But in HM, they did this for hundreds of trials, and he never got better at the repeated series.
I mean, there is kind of a difference between somebody who can create withdrawals memories and somebody who is completely unable to create them. So it makes sense that even if he gets repeated, he gets stuff repeated to him at 10,000 times, a million times, he will not be able to remember them, I will think. But yeah, that isn't the point. That got me off guard. I was interested in saying even more when you have your capacity of creating memories damaged, the short-term ones seem more interesting. That is why I will say, or I will suggest that all of the things that somebody with problems like these ones can do requires these people to really try their best. And when things, first and foremost, when things, as it said first, when things are last, you remember them better. And when things are repeated, you have more chances of absorbing that information for the sake of absorbing it. So, yeah, interesting enough to the degree to which it makes sense. But it still makes you think a little bit for the sake of seeing if you are kind of missing things on the way. As I would kind of suggest, for example, why would it be not necessary, by what? Why would it be important to simply test at 8? What if we were to test at 9, for example? Because they can, after enough repetitions, remember those things. What if we were to give them a list long enough so that they could try, even with 9 digits, try to remember them? The more you test, the more you find out. So yeah, it is interesting, but it also holds kind of a dark truth, and that is sometimes we like to believe we are getting somewhere with things that we do, when in reality we are kind of blocking ourselves from properly observing and getting all of the data that might be important. And even more here, because this particular teacher has also painted um, a study conducting psychologists and such as people almost cold-blooded, driven by data, and in reality it doesn't happen like that, my man. But well, I don't know. Continue.
So you could do endless repetition with him, or it could be personally important, he wouldn't remember it. So let me add one more piece to the story. That's if I talk to you and say, here are the digits, tell that back to me, that's an auditory verbal experiment. They're words and you're hearing them. You can also test short-term memory and long-term memory using a visuospatial test of blocks. So you're seeing what the examiner sees with numbers on the back of each of these. The person taking the test just sees these blocks as black boxes without any number. You need that because you have a piece of paper with numbers on it that tell you what to tap, okay? So when you give this test, you might see 5, 7, 8, and you would tap with your hand 5, 7, 8, and the person would tap that back. And I can tell you it made me pretty nervous when I gave this test if a person had a long one, because I'd have to read the numbers, practice it, and I'd be desperately trying to get 8 in my head, which I could barely do maybe, because I could tap 8 back, right? So it was always, if a person was good, right? And then we do the same thing. We say, if you can do 8, we'll test you at 9. And repeat them. And here's 2 findings, and then let's talk about HM for a moment. So one finding is, now in patients now, we're going to switch one thing a little bit. HM had the left and the right hippocampus removed. In these patients, they had either the left or the right removed, either the left or the right. So here's what happens for normal controls for the numbers that are beyond their span, not too good, low performance, but they benefit from repetition. Here's what happens for the patients with left hippocampal removals for the auditory verbal things for the digits. Good at short-term, sorry, let me get this right. Right, so they're good for immediate memory for this stuff, but they're terrible at developing the long-term memory over here if it's verbal. But the patients with the right temporal ones are just fine. For spatial things, it's exactly the opposite. The group that's really impaired are the patients with a large right hippocampal removal, and the people with the left hippocampal do just fine. So we have 2 separations in the brain for learning things in the medial temporal lobes. Neither the left nor the right are involved in short-term memory lasting only seconds. The left is important for verbal long-term memories, and the right is important for long-term spatial memories, which is very consistent with what we know about left and right hemispheres for verbal and spatial knowledge. So let me say a word more about how we think about the organization of memory.
Well, I mean, wait. Let me see. Well, at the very least, I can say, even more in the case of trying to properly absorb all the information regarding the different notions related to all the things that basically exist in accordance to the capacity of our brain of integrating them. I will guess it is even more important there to try and see how it might be possible to try and change mm, how it is that we absorb it. As in, these different tests show that in some cases people can integrate things better in one way and not in other, or the complete opposite in other fields. Therefore, by engaging in those activities more and more, it is that you can correctly see and observe and absorb even more if those things are working or not. But I don't know. It never stops being interesting to me. Also to see, for example, the optic of um, why would you try to eliminate people parts of their brain, even if it is for the sake of survival. But I don't know. Let me drink water and we continue.
Memory, and we'll come back to this chart. We're talking here so far about what people call declarative or explicit memory. You study some material, you get tested on it, what did you study? And people sometimes make a difference between two kinds of things. So episodic memory might be if I ask you, okay, I need a volunteer in your seat. It's really easy, this one. Okay, thanks. Okay, I saw some people getting ready to go, but well, okay. I'll start. Okay. What did you have for breakfast this morning? And you don't have to answer honestly if it's embarrassing. You can just give us a. I'm not looking to make. Yeah. Cereal. How about you? What? Yogurt. Yogurt. Cereal and yogurt. Two excellent, healthy answers. Okay. So now I'm going to ask you. If I could ask you first, how many feet in a yard? 3. Excellent, right? Okay. So and I'm going to ask you, when and where did you learn that? Okay. And you might go. You might go. I don't know. I just learned it, right? Or if I ask you, capital of France, Paris. Excellent answer. And when was the shocking moment when this was revealed to you? When you say, I'll never trust the world again, you know? Yes. Who knows, right? So what you're learning is episodic memory is memory for specific events, like what I did last night, what I had for breakfast, specific time and place. Semantic memory is what we could call generic memory. We know lots of things about the world, but we might not know when or where we learned it. Is that okay? So that's a distinction psychologists find useful to think about. So how about in HM? We said he can't remember digits or faces or things like that.
Wait. Okay, give me a second. What the fuck? Give me a second. What? Give me what? Give me a second. What the fuck? Okay, we are fine. It was all false alarm. I thought we had a random visits, but we're fine. Ah, man. Let me transition back into here. Wait, the bot is working. Amazing. Hello, bot. Welcome back, stream elements. Welcome back. Well, we were over here. I lost track of what was it that it was talking about, but yeah, let me give me a second. I will need to go back and rewatch. No.
Yes. Who
Something
knows,
like
right?
this.
So what you're learning is episodic memory is memory for specific events, like what I did last night, what I had for breakfast, specific time and place. Semantic memory is what we could call generic memory. We know lots of things about the world, but we might not know when or where we learned it. Is that okay? So that's a distinction psychologists find useful to think about. So how about in HM? We said he can't remember digits or faces or things like that. How about generic memory? So here's an experiment that I was involved in. where we said, because there were some debates about this at the time, so we gave HM a multiple choice test where we saw words or phrases that entered the language after the onset of his amnesia, okay? So we thought he wouldn't learn them, but we didn't know for sure from just everyday experience. And by the way, I should tell you, he watched tons of television, okay? What his experience was like watching television is an interesting question. So you should be thinking now about questions you want to ask about HM in a moment. I'll come back to that. But look at, so he has 4 choices for the word amniocentesis, including the correct one, but he picks an infectious inflammatory disease of the intestine. Apartheid, in front of him is the correct answer. 2 other answers, and he picks the separation of young cows that have not yet given birth to calves. Boat people who cater bon voyage parties, which is completely the wrong. Brainwash, the fluid that surrounds and bathes the brain. Granola, a portable keyboard, wind instrument. Software, expensive clothing made of a soft wool fabric. What's going on with him? Are these like crazy, weird answers, or how would you? What do we think is going on with him? Why is he picking these? The other one is right in front of him. What's he doing? Yeah, he's doing what teachers teach you in school, take apart the word into its parts, right? So he goes, software, soft clothes that you wear. I mean, but what does that mean? He's missed in every sense the advent of computers and software in the world, okay? The idea, the concept, the words, it's as if it didn't exist because in 1953, although software existed, it wasn't a very popular concept, right? Most people didn't know about the concept of that. 1953, the way we looked at these were not words that were in the dictionary in the 1950s. So, so now, what would you like to know about a man like HM? Yeah.
Okay, here, wait, pause. Pause. I guess what is important to see and kind of to address would be the notion of something like the way in which we interact with reality. Even more, if we do not understand it, is to try and take it from the places that we might have at the easiest time taking it from, let's say. As in, we try to make sense out of things from the tiniest amount of problems, almost naturally. And that is what I wanted to say the most, naturally. Because it also happens that in not some rare cases, in most of the times, we believe it is impossible for us to deal with actions and to deal with situations from the easiest starting point, when in reality it is almost hardwired inside of our nature to do it that way. So yeah, I don't know, man. It seems interesting to take it into account that he seems to know how to properly deal with those things from that side. Yeah, it makes me think like, where do we lose it? Is it part of the consciousness? Like, do we lose it because we develop a not simply a consciousness, the capacity of holding memories over long periods of time, and because of that, we also have the necessity of holding more stuff. Let's say, I don't know. I will simply say, for example, this guy, can he even know about this naturally, or is it that also his understanding of what he knows how to do in these kind of situations is also kicking in, let's say, because he also didn't lose all his previous memories. So I don't know. It seems interesting. At the very least, it has content to analyze. But yeah, I don't know. Let us continue. Let us continue.
Remember something that happened like 2 hours ago, but if you're having a conversation with them, would he not remember what you guys were talking about, or could he remember what the context of the conversation?
Right, so you're saying he wouldn't remember something 2 days ago, but you're talking with him. What's that like, right? So let me give you one experimental thing and then another experiment. So one experiment they did is they left him with something like 6 numbers, okay, well within the span, and said, remember these numbers. And it could be, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, that wouldn't work so well. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. 2, they leave the room for 15 minutes. They come back in. He's an excellent subject. He's going 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. What were the numbers? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. They go, that's excellent. You know, was there any trick you did to do that, or did you just? And you go, what were the numbers? Okay. As soon as a thought is out of his forefront of his mind, it's gone. Okay. So yeah, he would not recognize us if we spent many hours with him. A striking thing, which was amazing at first, and then sometimes irksome if you work with him, and he was a delightful guy, was that he would tell you a story from his past, and he didn't have a huge array of stories because they were all from a long time ago. And he would tell you like about a gun collection he had, and he would tell you he had 3 guns and they had this property and that property. He'd finish the story, and if you just stay quiet for a moment, he would forget that he told you the story, but it would be vaguely on his mind because he just told it to you. And he would say to you, hey, did I tell you about my gun collection? And he would tell you almost verbatim the same story. You just wait a moment. He forgot that he told you the story, but it's kind of slightly on his mind because he just told you it. And he goes, hey, did I tell you he could tell you this until you could bear it no longer, okay? All right. So it was kind of amazing how short his short-term memory was. Without this part of the brain, it's just a few seconds. His conversations were okay, but I would call them pretty shallow. I don't know how to put it. When you talk with somebody and you're on the phone and they're doing something else, and you can tell, for him it was a little bit like that. So he had so good social convention, he would smile, he would chat with you, but if what you're talking about depended on remembering something from 3 sentences ago in any detail, gone. Okay, just seconds, unless he's practicing without doing anything else. Yeah?
He did have the capability to learn procedurally.
Yes, we're going to come to that. So the question is, did he ever learn, that he had other kinds of learning that were amazingly, completely normal in him? Procedural memory, you're absolutely right, and we'll come to that just in about 20 minutes, okay? Exactly right, and if I don't answer that well, make me do that again, okay? But yeah.
Okay, I guess with that we can wait here, and we can transition into here, because we also need to get this close for today. I mean, man, it seems interesting enough. The notion of having so much interest on this guy case is good. I am not really worried because it already happened, but the possibility of analyzing it even further is what makes it kind of not simply interesting, kind of wonderful to keep seeing, let's say like that. So yeah, I don't know, my man. It is good, but also it is at the same time weird. I will guess and I will hope that the rest of the lecture would be as interesting as this one was, or at the very least a little bit more, or not at the very least. If I could ask for more, a little bit more, also would be fine, I think. Because yeah, it was fine, yes, but in some parts you can really get anything out of an anecdote. Like I mean, I understand that he had such a short-term memory that he will tell things 3 or 4 times in a row, or infinite times in a row, as long as you didn't change his thinking pattern. It even happens with functional people, my man. That if you can avoid thinking about something and you let it linger in your mind, you will go back to it, no matter what else you will want to do, because you didn't get rid of that thought. So yeah, it is interesting, but also it doesn't really have that much proper explanation, I would say. Not that I am anybody to really judge in the sense of, wow, what a bad teacher, wow, no. But rather, why not try to go for something more, my man? But well, anyways, no real complaining. As always, it is incredibly free and open online for everybody to watch. So it is a beautiful thing to engage in, and even more a beautiful thing to observe and a beautiful tool to extract knowledge from. So yes, how to not be grateful for that, and how to not say that it is incredibly good to also keep engaging on it even more. So yeah, I think with that we can properly say that at least for this part, for this first half of the lecture we are done. Um, I have been thinking I might try to fit more lectures at night, probably at the start of the week or during the weekend or something like that, to have the possibility of going through them completely instead of quote unquote randomly jumping to them. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. At the very least, we have it working. Let's say like this. So we will see. We will see what else can we do next time almost. But well, um, let me see. I am missing something. I think I am not missing almost anything. Just yeah, in my memory I can't find any particular thing that we are or that we are missing. So with that said, it was very nice. It was very enjoyable. How to not have it be enjoyable? But yeah, we might as well also require to take a break, require to go do something else for a bit. And well, in this occasion, we might as well leave, we might as well go and entertain ourselves with something. in this case, I think we can properly go and try to watch some Severin or slash Raiden, basically the same. We're going to raid Severin and Naharin, who is playing what? What is this game? Felsiel. I don't know what it is. This is I guess this is one of those tactical games. Like I wouldn't say like XCOM because I know it didn't invent the whole genre of those games, but something like that to exemplify properly. But yeah, anyways, people, thanks as always for being here. It is beautiful to be doing this. It is very interesting to learn and to address the information that is given to us as it needs to be done properly. Remember to stay safe. Thanks for everything. Thanks for being here. And well, next time we are going to do some more analysis. Tonight we have a list, so I will look forward to that. I I will try to not go for 3 hours long probably, but at the very least for two, at the very least, as it still is something interesting to do. So yeah, and as always, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for enjoying. If it happened that you enjoyed this, thanks for watching the world, for looking for talking, and remember to stay safe. Remember to stay hydrated. Now we live with a raid. To whom? To Severin Naharin, who is playing again. Let's leave it at that. Thanks for everything. Goodbye. Stay safe. And whenever it happens. We will get back later. Now, goodbye. Stay safe. Ciao. Raid.